It's time for Eco Art for Kids. Come on, let's go to Silverwood. And Earth Day is coming up. So today, when we're hiking along the trails at Silverwood and starting to notice things and looking at artwork, let's think about what we can do to make the kind of Earth that we want to live in. Let's go exploring. Hold on a second. I was walking along the trail, and then I noticed this. It kind of looks like a shopping cart. Why is it here? Well, it's actually art. Let's take a closer look at it. I'll step aside and we'll give you the opportunity to look at it for about 30 seconds with your eyes. See what you can notice. And remember, try to make your own meaning first before you look at what the artist intended. Here, I'll step aside and let you look. What do you see? I'll tell you what I noticed about this piece of art. Now remember, all of the artwork along the trail at Silverwood all points to nature. What? How does this point to nature? Well, I noticed that it is a shopping cart, but it doesn't look silver like most of the shopping carts you might see in a parking lot. It looks like it's maybe like bronze or gold colored. I also noticed that it's not on pavement. It's on the ground, on dirt. And on top of that, it isn't in a parking lot. It's surrounded by nature. What? Well, now that we've taken a look at it to notice the things that we notice about it, what do you think the artist intended by making this piece of art? Well, the piece is called Shopping Cart by an artist named Alexa Horchowski. She made it so that we would think about how what we buy affects the environment. That is why it's surrounded by nature. And it's made to look bronze or golden because a lot of art that's out in the public is made out of that same material. So she took powdered bronze and covered an actual shopping cart with it to make it different from a shopping cart that you might see in a parking lot. So, what do you think? How does what we buy affect nature? Do we affect nature? I know that I'm a part of nature, but what I buy stays out of nature, right? Well, what about when you buy something and it's wrapped in little plastic packaging? That stays out of nature, right? You know what? I know that my friend Bailey knows a lot about plastic. So I'm going to hand it over to Bailey so that she can show us how plastic affects the environment and how what we do can affect the environment. Bailey?
Thanks, Seth. My name is Bailey Call, and I'm an interpretive naturalist at Silverwood Park. And today I want to talk to you a little bit about plastics, and specifically microplastics. But first we have to know a few things about plastic. So I want to introduce a word to you. The word is decompose. That means to break down into parts or to disintegrate into the earth. Now, some things take longer to do that, and some things take shorter. Take, for example, this cardboard box. This cardboard box takes about 2 months to decompose. So that isn't very long in the scheme of some other things. For example, I have a tin can here, and a tin can takes about 50 years to decompose. That's about half of a human lifespan. So that's a pretty long time. Something like a newspaper, though, takes a very short amount of time. This only takes 6 weeks in the scheme of things to decompose. And finally, we have plastic. So this is the plastic bottle. And sometimes people say that these actually never decompose. They just break down into smaller and smaller parts. But some people say that these take about 450 years to decompose. So that is a really long time. And today we're going to talk a little bit more about that. These can decompose into lots of different things. And typically those things are called microplastics. There are some other types of microplastics that we'll talk about here in a sec, but these ones actually are made into fragments. So we're going to talk about microplastics a little bit and some of the ways that we can help our Earth by being conscious and using our plastics very, very seldom. All right, so let's get started. Okay, so we're going to talk more about plastic and specifically microplastics. So microplastics are different than plastic because they're pieces of plastic that are about 5 millimeters or smaller. So that is quite small. Those pieces of plastic can end up in the environment in a lot of different ways. But I'm going to show you some types of microplastic. So here we have just a few types. These types of microplastics can look a lot of different ways. So we have a couple here. The first one I'm going to start with is Nurdles. Now, I'll bring these nice and close so you can see them. So Nurdles are little plastic pellets, and these are usually used in manufacturing. These pellets are melted down to make all sorts of different shapes and components, packaging, all sorts of different things. And these can end up in our environment through spills, or discarding these pellets inappropriately. So these are one type of plastic, of microplastic. All right. Another type you might think of is fragments. So fragments are things that were made from plastic that are now breaking down. So they're smaller pieces of a larger plastic object. They might be different colors, different shapes, different sizes. These are pieces of plastic that have broken down in the environment from other larger pieces of plastic. So that's one type of microplastic. Those are fragments. Another type are fibers. A lot of fibers are synthetic. There are some that are natural, but a lot of them are synthetic. These are fibers from dryer lint. And these fibers are one of the most common types of microplastic. They're usually from strands of clothing. So clothing that is made out of poly anything, like polyester is all made of plastic. That's another type of microplastic. All right. Another kind is foam. So foam in this demonstration, this would be the type of foam that people would use in manufacturing. So this might be foam that's used for things like stuffed animals or quilts or pillows. But a lot of times foam can actually be pieces of food containers and coffee cups that are meant to insulate things. And so these break down and then you have foam as a microplastic. So that's another type. The final type of microplastic that we're going to talk about are microbeads. Now, microbeads are often used in soaps and cosmetics. So let's take a look at these. It might be very hard to see them. They are very, very small. Let's see if we can get nice and close. You might be able to see the light reflecting off some of these beads. Most microbeads are found in cosmetics, though a lot of them have been eliminated because they've been outlawed in many, many places. And so we don't see microbeads very much anymore. Usually there's a substitute that you will see that companies will put inside of the microbeads, or inside, that are not actually plastic made microbeads. So that's another type of microplastic. So all of these different types of plastic can end up in our environment. And we're going to take a look at that here in just a moment, and take a look at how maybe some of these things end up in our world. How do they end up in our animals and our waterways? How do they end up getting from the products that we use to the environment? So we're going to explore that in a little bit. All right, let's imagine that this is an ocean, or even maybe just a lake or a stream. And all of these pieces of salt are the animals and the plants inside of the stream. The air can act as the water. So there are microplastics actually hidden within this body of water, but they're really small. So I have a little pair of tweezers here, and I'm gonna see if I can grab one of these. Oh, there. I got one. Now that is a sizable piece of microplastic. What if I went for an even smaller one? Oof. Something I'm noticing is that it's really hard to get some of these even smaller pieces of plastic. Oh, there, I got one. Can you see that? It's tiny. That little tiny piece of microplastic is so hard to see. It's actually right there in my hand, right there. Something I noticed is way harder to get those littler pieces. So do you think that we should try and get microplastics when they're bigger or when they're littler? Let's think about that. Well, I know that it was a lot easier to get a larger piece of plastic out of this container than it was a smaller one. I wonder if the same thing applies outside. Well, let's get outside and see if we can find some plastics that we can remove from the earth. Hi, welcome outside. This is a little forested area near my home, and today I am going to go on kind of a plastic scavenger hunt. So I brought a couple tools with me. I brought a pair of tongs, I brought some gloves, and I brought a paper sack. I am going to try and find some plastics in this area and collect them and throw them away so that they don't make their way into the waterways. Now, this area is on a hill, so what would happen is if we found plastic in this area, it would actually get washed down the hill with the rain and into a near waterway. It also could get picked up by a bird or eaten, unfortunately. One of the other things I wanted to show you too, oh yep, I got it right here, is this. So this, I'll come on close so you can see, might look like to a predator fish eggs, but this in fact is a type of potpourri. Now, once this gets into the water, it would be really hard for predators to tell this apart. So that's why some of these plastics can be so harmful, is that they're replacing the things that the animals would normally eat. So hopefully we don't find any of these, but I wanted to show you that as well. So let's go ahead and begin our plastic scavenger hunt. All right, do you see what I see? Right there. There is some plastic. And it has already started to fall apart. It looks like this is from maybe a chip bag. It looks like quite shiny. Clearly not supposed to be out in nature. So we'll go ahead and collect that and put it in our sack. Oh, do you see what I see? I see another piece of plastic. Let's take a look here. Oh, yeah. There we are. More plastic. Right in the bag. Oh, and not too far from it, another food wrapper. Right in the bag. All right, so I just came upon this elderberry tree, which is beautiful in spring. They have these amazing buds that just reach out. They're so pretty. But right on it is this giant tangled piece of plastic. Now I'm gonna take this plastic off. Look how much nicer that looks for that elderberry. It's so nice to see it in its natural state. All right, so I was out for maybe about 25 minutes and I have an entire bag full of trash, so much so that the handle broke off of my trash bag. So I am really happy that I got to clean up this area and remove a ton of microplastics from possibly getting into the waterways of this space near my house. I feel so proud and so happy that I was able to do this today and get to really make this place nice for the wildlife that calls it home. So something that you can try at home is taking a couple pieces of paper with some tape on them and labeling them not plastic or NP or plastic. And you might be surprised to see how many things actually contain plastic. Take, for example, this rope. This rope is poly rope. The entire thing is plastic. Or, for example, these socks. These socks are made of polyester. That's a type of plastic. These socks have plastic in them. Or even glitter. Craft glitter actually has, these are actually a microplastic as they're made. So these would be plastic. We can make some really important choices when we're buying things or we're out in the world about the ways in which we use plastic. We can make choices about what we buy, the containers that things come in, the materials that they're made out of. We have so many great choices in the world, and I think we can be creative and work together and try and solve some of these issues of so much plastic in our world. Thank you so much for getting to learn with me today. I hope you learned some things about microplastics and some ways that we can help protect our Earth. Thank you again, and back to you, Seth.
Wow, that was really cool. Thanks, Bailey. Well, now that Bailey's shown us how what we do can affect the environment, I think we can get to making. And when we make this art project, we can think about the kind of world we want to live in and what we can do to make that happen. We're going to be making a diorama out of recycled materials or things from the waste stream. So a lot of the things that I'm using, I collected out of the recycling bin or the trash. So you can use any number of materials. I'll show you some of them that I'm using, but feel free to be creative and find anything that you can find. Some of the materials I'm using are also from outside, so feel free to go outside and collect your own branches, leaves, bits of nature that are all part of the world that you want to make. I'll show you what I'm using. I have a thin piece of cardboard box that I'll be able to cut out in order to make my diorama. I have markers if I want to add any colors. I also went out and collected some natural materials. So I have this branch. I have colored paper. I have an old magazine. This one happens to have animals that live in Minnesota that I might be able to cut out and make an environment for. I have glue sticks, just in case I want to glue flat things onto each other. Paintbrushes. Lots of different colors of paint. A glue gun can be handy, though that is up to your adults. If you aren't able to use a glue gun, you can also use liquid white glue. And I have a bunch of pieces of thin cardboard. I'm using thin cardboard so that I can cut it with a scissors. I don't want to use cardboard that's corrugated. So this is from a pizza box or a cereal box. And of course, if I'm going to be cutting things, a scissors. All right. Now remember, when we're making this art project, we want to think about the world that we want to live in and actions we can take to make that world happen. Let's go. All right, we're making a diorama. Now, a diorama is a miniature three-dimensional scene. So we're going to want to make sure that our box has an opening in it so that we can actually see the scene. And when we think about making our diorama, we'll want a background, a middle ground, and a foreground. So it's pretty clear. A background is farthest back, the middle ground is in the middle, and the foreground is more towards the front. Here we go. I'm going to take my scissors and I'm going to cut an opening in my box, okay? Now it might seem tricky, this might need an adult's help, but I'm actually going to cut a hole in the middle first, like this, by poking one, and then I'm going to work my way out. And I kind of like the way that this box looks, so I might keep a small border. There we go. Now I have an opening for my diorama. Now when I think about making this as well, another thing that I'll want to think about is the background, right? So I'm going to start thinking about the background. And in the world that I want, there's going to be, I think, clear, clean skies. So I think I'll paint a background in, okay? There. I think I will call that good. Now, if I'm not comfortable painting, I'll show you another thing that you can do to make a background as well. For now, I'll let this dry. Alright, if I'm not comfortable painting or drawing a background, you can always collage using a magazine or newspaper. So for example, I love this image. It is a tree covered in red-winged blackbirds. And in the world that I want to live in, I would love if this would just keep happening all the time. So if I want to use this as my background, all I have to do is take my box, and if you think about it, this is the size of that back panel. So if I put my box down on top of the image that I want to use as a background, I can take a marker, trace around my box, and then take a scissors and cut following that line. Maybe something like this. Now I know that this image is the same size as my box. So I could take it along with a glue stick and glue it right into the back if I wanted to. But like I said, I like this painted backdrop. What I will do though is I will add a little bit of this image into my painted backdrop. So what I think I might do is take just a section of the tree, maybe like that, and cut it out, and then I'll glue that into my backdrop. There, it already looks pretty three-dimensional. So I've taken care of my background, but now I want to make my midground, okay? And in the world that I want to live in, I want to make sure there are plenty of animals. So in my midground, I'm actually going to put animals in. So for this, I am going to also use my magazine. I know this one has some images of peregrine falcons in it. Like that. So I'll show you now how to make it nice and stable to cut out one of these images, mount it on a piece of cardboard, and then glue that into your diorama. Alright, I'm going to mount this on a piece of cardboard to make it nice and strong. So I'll just take my glue stick. Glue it on. There we are, nice and strong, mounted on a piece of cardboard. Now in my midground, I know I have a tree in my background, but if you remember, I also collected a natural material, so I think I'm going to use that stick to be a tree that this peregrine falcon can be on. Now, in order to put these in place, I'm gonna need some hot glue. Alright, I have my hot glue gun all ready and warmed up. Now, remember, if you are using a hot glue gun, the metal tip is hot. That's why it's called a hot glue gun, so don't touch it. And anything coming out that metal tip is also hot, so try not to touch it. Just use a little bit at a time to try to stabilize the things that you're gluing. So I'm going to start off and glue in this stick. Then I'm going to glue my falcon. I'm just going to put a little line of glue across there. Let's see if I can get it to stick right on there. There. Now I have a midground. I would like to add some leaves onto that branch, so I'm going to cut a few of them out of some green paper. Now here's where I'm going to use some markers. You can really go crazy with all kinds of art materials, and I'm just showing you a few techniques that you can use on top of each other. But if you have something flat, you can add extra details with marker. Alright, it's coming together pretty nicely, huh? So I have a background, I have a midground, and now I'm going to take care of a foreground. So that is the part of my diorama that's at the very front. And I know that in the world that I want to live in, there will be thriving habitats and ecosystems. So there will be plants, there will be animals, and I want to be part of that world too. So I'm going to make a little version of myself, and I think I might put it somewhere in this area. There's my complete diorama. I have a background, a midground, and a foreground. A back, middle, and front. Now, I hope that you can go and make your own diorama of the kind of world that you want to live in. And if you have a chance, think of what you can do for Earth Day and every day to make that world real. Thanks for joining us today on another Eco Art for Kids. Bye!